Welcome to Daily Dose of DevOps. Today we'll go through some Linux commands and examples that tend to align with each of the OSI models, 7 layers. We should all be familiar with OSI model 7 layers. If not, definitely look at that. It could be definitely an interview question that you'll get. I know this particular question or this particular subject that we're talking about today, I have gotten questions very similar to this in DevOps interviews, and they're also questions I've given in DevOps interviews. So let's get right into it. We're going to go present a problem, which on this server here, the problem is that we cannot ping www.google.com. So we're going to go through all the layers one by one using Linux commands to try to diagnose what the problem is here. So if we start, we can start either at layer 1 or layer 7. In this case, we'll start at layer 1 at the physical layer. In this layer, typically you want to know what's happening at the network card level, right? Is it plugged into a switch? Is the cable operational? Most of the time, we might be working in the cloud now, so these are all virtualized and virtual cable, virtual everything. So in this case, we can still use ethtool. We want to find out what the interface is here. It's ENS5. So we will run an ethtool on ENS5, and we will see that the link is detected. So this tells you that physical layer looks good. The link is up. If it was a physical server, we'd say the cable is plugged into the switch, the lights are lit, everything looks good. So after layer 1, we move up to layer 2, which is the data link layer. At this layer, we want to make sure your host can reach the gateway or router. In this case, our router is 172.31.32.1. So if we run an arp-n, arp would typically be a good command to run at layer 2. That, or we can run the IP neighbor command. This will tell us that our router is reachable, and this would be the MAC address of the actual router. So in this case, the data link layer looks good, layer 2. We want to move up to layer 3 now. Layer 3 is the network layer, and we want to check the IP configuration details and ensure that the correct DNS servers are set. So here we look at resolve.conf. We see that there is a name server, 127.0.0.53. We can then ping that name server, and we see that it is pingable. So at this point, network layer looks good. So we move up to layer 4. Layer 4 is the transport layer. And in this instance, we would use a tool like netstat to verify if there's an active connection to the DNS server. And here we can run a netstat-an and grep for port 53. Here you see that we actually have a DNS server listening on 127.0.0.53 on port 53, TCP, and UDP. So here, transport layer looks good. We want to move to the session layer, which is layer 5. Layer 5 session layer, we would test connectivity to the DNS server using something like telnet or netcat. In this case, we can use telnet, and we can try to telnet to port 53. We can definitely see that it is listening on port 53. DNS via the session layer looks good. So we quit out of there. We move up to the presentation layer, layer 6. Usually DNS issues wouldn't need troubleshooting at this level since DNS uses mostly clear text, non-encrypted communication, and typically presentation layer is, we'll see more troubleshooting on the encryption level here. So we'll move right to the last level, last layer, layer 7, application layer. And here we have multiple commands we can use. We can use host and put in www.google.com. That returns an IP address of 142.250.190.4. We run a dig on this. Dig is another command. It returns the A record for www.google.com, also with the same IP address. You can also use nslookup and do the same thing. And we can see that this returns both an IPv4 and IPv6 IP address for google.com. So application layer, everything looks good. So where do we go from here? So here you really use your experience, and I would say that it looks like it's not a network issue. And what we're looking at is we're looking at an actual configuration issue. So something within the OS is misconfigured and preventing us from being able to ping google.com. My first instinct would be to use strace. And let's just run a strace with the command we're running, which is ping www.google.com. And let's just see what strace does just at the end here, what type of system calls or files it's trying to access here. And it's it's trying to open etc hosts. It's also opening up etcresolve.conf and also nsswitch.conf. So just from my experience, you can open up some of these files and see if they're maybe misconfigured. nsswitch.conf, in this case, looking at nsswitch.conf, this line here is telling us that during resolution of hosts, which in this case, google.com is a host, it is using just files, which means it's probably just using etc hosts to try to resolve that. And there is no www.google.com here for in the etc host file. So that's telling me that it's probably failing. So this looks like a problem. So I would actually edit this file. You can always use another server to compare this to, but I know that in this case, we're missing the DNS line here in hosts. So after changing nsswitch to have a DNS as well as files. So anytime you go to resolve a host file, it's going to look in etc hosts, but it'll also try to use DNS. Let's try to ping google.com, and we got it.